بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Ask Eman live on Eman Channel on Sky 757, streaming it also live via our Facebook page, YouTube channel and via our website emanchannel.tv. Humble reminder to like, share, comment and subscribe to all our platforms including our Facebook page, YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram and follow us on X too, formerly known as Twitter. 0203 515 0757, our studio number 079 16841 483, our WhatsApp number. International viewers can use the WhatsApp number, and feel free to either call in, send us your question via text on WhatsApp, leave your questions in the comment section below, either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. Inshallah, we'll try our level best to take as many questions as possible. Your host, Qamar al-Islam, and joining us, none other than Sheikh Abid Khan. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khair for giving us your valuable time. Now, let's start our conversation before we move on to our question, and that is, how should people in the position of power and influence should conduct themselves, especially with languages and words, if they know that can cause division, disharmony, and especially if it's inflammatory? How would you respond in light of Quran and Sunnah?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the bestower of mercy. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa baraka rasulullah. All perfect praise belongs to Him alone, and may His peace and blessings and benedictions be upon all His messengers, the last of whom is Muhammad, and upon his family and companions. To proceed, the issue which is at the heart of your question is one which cannot be overstated, and that is the question of responsibility. Taking responsibility for one's actions, one's statements, is something which is ordinarily known and recognized. However, when in a position of influence and when you have a platform of some sort, the significance and indeed the duty of holding one's own self to account could not possibly be overstated. The reason for that is because while ordinarily the Prophet ﷺ in the Quran indeed has urged us to be really considerate about, we say, to even a single individual, when one has a platform, actually the ramifications of it only become magnified many times over. But just on a simple one-to-one basis, let's consider what the Quran says. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He says, ما يلفظ من قول إلا لديه رقيب عتيد. Not a single utterance is stated or emerges from a person except that there's a watchful scribe writing down everything that is said. And that is in Surah Qaf. And similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِعِلْمٍ. Don't say that which you have no sure certain knowledge of. إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Indeed, the hearing and the sight and the faculties will all be held to account for what has been said and heard, etc. And also, one ends up putting others into a sense of jeopardy, in a state of jeopardy, because ultimately they may end up acting with inflamed emotions and the like. You see nowadays the rise of so many hate crimes, be that in terms of anti-Muslim bigotry and hate, or anti-Jewish hate, anti-Hindu hate, etc. All of these are not the ways of Islam to actually stoke flames of division and civil distress and unrest within societies, because that is not something which is good in and of itself. It's not something good in and of itself. It's something which is also not conducive to the enhancement of understanding, bridge building, and actually the furtherance of education, learning, study, and ultimately the spread of even the message of God Almighty. So it's something which is really important that we warn people with platforms from using improper language. And improper language, by the way, is language which will cause any of those nefarious outcomes which I've just outlined. But in addition to that, it also includes language which is improper. The Prophet ﷺ was described, it says, he was ما كان فاحشا. He was not someone taken to using obscene speech, or بديء, that which is kind of vulgar. But rather, he would speak in that which is best, in the manner which is best. Allah says in the Quran, ادع إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Invite to the way of your Lord with wisdom and goodly preaching, and only debate or argue in a manner which is best. And you see this in the Prophet's own example when he faced many sorts of people who came with a real adversarial energy, and he would contain himself and retain the sense of equilibrium and equanimity. And that is the way that the one who is inspired by the prophetic manner and paradigm, the way that such a person should also conduct themselves, and Allah knows best.
Jazakallahu khairan for that. Now, let's move on to our first question, the video question. And I'd like to remind our viewers, if you'd like to send us your question via video, you can record a short video, keep it concise, precise, and to the point, and just be aware of the background where you're recording, and send it to us, inshallah. We will try our best to put it on air. Now, let's move on to our video question. Inshallah, apology for that. I think we'll go back to that if we have time. But let's start with this question since I've got time. Sheikh, we'll start with this question, an important question from our sister on WhatsApp. And it's an important because it applies to many of the parents that are watching the program. Assalamu alaikum. I wanted to ask about my daughter. She has always been insecure about her nose and want to have it changed slightly by plastic surgery. I've always been against it, but she's adamant. She's 21 now and has her own money and wants to travel to have the procedure. I cannot stop her, but she wants me to go with her. Would that make me, the mother, sinful too, as I've tried everything to stop her, but worried about her safety? How would you respond, Sheikh?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Firstly, thank you for your question, and I pray that Allah grants you and your family, your daughter, and all others similar in similar challenging circumstances as yours, grants them ease and afiyah, well-being. That is. In terms of your specific question, I cannot urge and overstate the fact that while a person, of course, a parent needs to be responsible and not just given to the emotions of the moment of one's own child, etc. What also needs to be borne in mind and understood is that there are circumstances where you yourself are not engaged in any sort of crime, of course, and any sort of sin yourself, nor are you aiding or abetting any such thing either yourself. The concept of being there for the moral support to almost help someone along a certain journey and path to recovery is something which is also important. So that's a general introductory point I want to make. And that's because that introductory point gets to the heart, I think, of your question. You're not trying to encourage a particular action. Indeed, you've done all that's in your capability, you say, to try and dissuade them from doing what you feel is an unnecessary sort of procedure, and one which ultimately may carry some sort of health risks or benefit, health risks or post certain, there's always some sort of issues, even if it's just going under a general anesthetic and emerging from that. Sure, there are statistics and probabilities and things are carefully calibrated, one would like to think, inshallah, but there are always risks to that, alongside other concerns as well, in terms of emotional, psychological, etc. So you've made your point clear. However, you're trying to be there to be in a supportive sense, not actually condoning or encouraging, but actually just trying to ensure the safety from other angles as well. So that's the circumstance. Now, that all having been said, I must add the next point, which I don't say just as a disclaimer, but actually one of central importance, which is, it is, I think, vitally important that in such scenarios that one tries to reach out to some sort of local scholarship with a qualified expert, and someone maybe with a pastoral expertise, a psychological understanding and literacy, and professional in that regard. and you can kind of liaise with them because they'd be able to offer you some of the vitally important insights to how to go about things from where you are right now to the other end in terms of aftercare, etc. as well. So I think you really need to speak to some people, maybe more than one person, to try and help guide you in terms of how to go about this, about in the sensitive stage. And even in terms of the overall ruling, the ruling can of what your daughter is engaged in. That's again something which is subject to discussion based on circumstances and her own overall state, both I don't mean just externally, but also internally, emotionally, psychologically as well. So all of that is basically to say that there's a lot to unpack in your question. I've tried to address this general phenomenon just for educational purposes, but in terms of the specifics, both for your daughter and also for yourself, in terms of how to offer that support best, I would recommend speaking to some healthcare professionals, some psychological experts, and also Islamically qualified experts as well. And Allah knows best.
Jazakallahu khairan for that. So disclaimers given there. So please take necessary advice from all the professionals that you have heard. May Allah make it easy for you and all the parents across. It's time for a short break. We'll be right back in a few moments. You're watching Ask Eman. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. You're watching Ask Eman live on Eman Channel with Sheikh Abid Khan. Contact details are displayed at the bottom of your screen. Humble reminder, do like, share, comment and subscribe to our Facebook page, YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter or X now as it's known. and our Instagram page. If you've missed the first segment, you can find us on our Facebook or YouTube channel. Now, Sheikh, let's move on swiftly to our next question, and we shall be taking it from YouTube, or in fact from WhatsApp. Let's start with it. My question, is it true before going to Hajj or Umrah we should not have any loans pending on us and should be paid off before leaving for either Hajj or Umrah, Sheikh?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. In terms of going to Hajj or Umrah, specifically Hajj, Hajj is one of the obligatory actions, spiritually mandated, that is to say, upon an adult, sane and healthy Muslim, and one who's of financial means. And that is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, in Surah Ali Imran, the 3rd chapter of the Quran, He says, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. To Allah belongs the duty from the people that they should perform the Hajj to the sacred house, that's the Kaaba, whoever has the ability to do so. And ability includes financial abilities. Now, the point is, however, if you have debts owed to someone, either individual or an institution, etc., then and the debts are such that it actually subsumes your assets, those of your disposable income, etc., then in reality, that's you're in effect in the red, not in the black. You owe others money, and so you're not really as solvent as some of the numbers may otherwise assume. It may lead on to think. So if you've got a few £1,000s in your bank account, but actually the amount of debt you owe to others is greater than this £1,000, then in reality, those few £1,000s you have in your bank account could be called upon at any stage. That's the overall thinking, which leads to the tension inherent in the question. However, in reality, the situation actually that scholars explain is that the reason for debt being an issue only holds true. It only is an issue if that debt is a short-term debt. So, for example, if someone said, or let's say there's an institutional debt, that means one which you have in black and white, then they're not going to be expecting anything beyond an annual amount. And the annual amount, I'm just giving you a crass example of £1,000, and you happen to have £10,000 in your bank account. So you know that you've paid your £1,000, or you're definitely able to pay the £1,000 for this year, and even next year, and the year after, and you still have enough to perform the Hajj for yourself as an individual. So your duty to go on Hajj would still be, you'd still be liable for going to Hajj, inshallah, assuming all other conditions are fulfilled in your case, and you'd be able to pay the debt off. So basically, and the thing goes, for example, if they're two individuals, maybe you owe your sister or your brother a certain amount of money that you had borrowed from them, but they say, you know what, it's cool, you can go on Hajj anyway, and give it to us, 1 year later. Again, assuming there's no, and they don't say there's going to be any extra interest borne out as a result of that. They're both religiously minded, observant Muslims, so you're not engaged in that sort of riba as well. So that's fine. The bottom line is, if it's a deferred loan, one which is not immediately pending, then you can go on Hajj or Umrah without it be affecting any stability. And even if you were to have gone, according to in the scenario other than that, your Hajj would still be acceptable. But the point is, it would not have been due on you in that way, because actually your liabilities exceed your assets. I hope that has answered your question. But as ever, when you have big decisions like this, such as of financial nature, and it can have ramifications, repercussions way beyond the moment, then it is always prudent and proper for you to consult a financial expert and a qualified scholar who can help you navigate such situations, inshallah. And wabillahi tawfiq.
Just briefly, student loan, if someone has got Sharia-compliant mortgage, how does that work?
Student loans. So the way student loans work is such that, as I understand, it's taken from at source. So if you're earning, let's say, in excess of £25,000, then on a yearly or monthly basis, it's taken out at source. So that still means whatever you have of finances, then that would not actually, that's still yours. and is not subject to any of the other outstanding loans that exist, and so you could still go on Hajj or Umrah. And the same would apply to home purchase plan as well, inshallah ta'ala. Allah knows best.
Jazakallahu khairan for that. Now let's move on to our next question. But before we move on to our next social media questions, let's find out who our callers are. First on the line. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much for calling in. Your question, please.
My question is, if Qadr is written, why should we make dua if it's already going to happen for me?
Brilliant, beautiful question. And Jazakallah khairan for calling in. And I recognize your voice. MashaAllah, you are a regular viewer, always watch our program. And we appreciate your support. Jazakallah khairan for calling in. Sheikh, well-known viewer, always watches Eman Channel and always engages and is asking an important question. If it's written on Qadr, if it's written already, then what's the purpose of making dua if it's bound to happen?
So it's mentioned in the narration of Umar ibn Khattab that he says in the hadith that, from the Prophet that there are two, regarding the ayah in the Quran, Allah says, يَمْحُ اللَّهُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيُثْبِتُ وَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْكِتَابِ إلى آخر الآية. He says, and indeed he, if you like, wipes away from the slate or from the records that which he wills, and he affirms or establishes and asserts that which he wills, and with him is the true final ultimate record. So in regard to this verse, Umar explains that there are with God, or there are two references or two records or two books. One, which is, if you like, that which is the if you like, the ordainments for this year, that is downloaded, sent down to the angels, and they have certain things that they know they're meant to do. However, the record therein can be changed by the effects of dua, and hence you have the prophetic tradition, the hadith, which says لا يرد القضاء إلا الدعاء لا يرد القضاء إلا الدعاء, that nothing except for dua can actually have the capacity and the effect of changing qada. Which qada and qadr is this? Which predestination is this? That which the angels have access to. So ultimately, qada is change. It has the potent effect of changing qada and qadr. Dua, supplication, can change that which has been predestined. But even that is something which is known to God and recorded in the ultra macro record, in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, in the preserved tablet. So basically, dua is akin to any other means or mechanism or method or sabab, asbab that you do. So your livelihood is decreed by Allah, and yet you go out in the morning to try and make efforts, because that is your gesture of taking means. And similarly, you make dua, that's your gesture of taking means. And just as your actions of going to work in the morning will give you your livelihood, so does dua. But just as you will make those efforts to go to work, that is also written in the scripture, in the preserved tablet, as is the fact that sometimes you will not be able to go to work, or you, Allah forbid, not have work, or you will be unwell, etc. So there is, everything that will happen is part of Allah's overall knowledge, as in overall meaning that everything's known by God. However, what people have access to, or what the angels have access to specifically, I meant to say, then that can change, and it's something which is attested to through certain ayat which are more ambiguous in nature, like such as the one I referenced, and also specifically in the hadith literature, and also something which is spoken to by the statements of the earliest generation of Muslim communities, such as the Sahaba.
Excellent. I literally have 1.5 minutes. The next question, Abdullah is asking on YouTube, dealing with anxiety or health anxiety. I obsessively check online for symptoms causing anxiety and disrupting prayer, i.e. he is referring to dua. I only come after seeing a doctor and not while making dua. How can I strengthen trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Sheikh?
It starts also through your thought process. Certain things will help strengthen your thought process, such as reading about how Allah always comes to the help of the believers mentioned in the Quran in several places. Also, reading the seerah of the Prophet, you see in his life an example, the best example of someone who really trusted in Allah, and how he faced so many calamities and tribulations, and yet he remained steadfast. He kept his cool, his composure, remained collected, and continued along the path. So you see in the Quran, in the prophetic example, a brilliant example, model of remaining contained, and simultaneously make a lot of dua, remember him plentifully. These things will help, keep things in check, inshallah. But ultimately, you need to seek professional help, because that is sometimes anxiety is a natural condition which needs to be treated, and that might be the situation in your situation, or may not be. So you need to consult experts, inshallah.
Excellent. And of course, alhamdulillah, we live in a country where NHS service is available, and we can speak to a GP and get the necessary appropriate referrals, inshallah, to the specialist, and inshallah take appropriate advice accordingly. It's time for another break. We'll be right back in a few moments. You're watching Ask Eman. Do stay tuned with us. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. You're watching Ask Eman live on Eman Channel, Sky 757 with Sheikh Abid Khan. We're also streaming it live via our website, emanchannel.tv, on our Facebook and YouTube channel, of course, official Facebook and YouTube channel. And feel free to like, share, comment and subscribe. 0203 515 0757, our studio number, 079 16841 483, our WhatsApp number. Now, Sheikh, let's move on to our next question. You've answered a question in the previous segment regarding Qadr, and I think we have got another question regarding the Qadr, and that is, what is the explanation for Qadr? Some people may argue that if I'm a bad person or if I sin, Allah wanted me to sin. Na'udhu billah. Sheikh, over to you. Sheikh, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa barak. So this question of predestination is something which ultimately has been discussed and disputed. It has been discussed and disputed for as long as can be recollected. So theologians from Augustine to the like, I'm talking about pre-Islamic discussions, etc., were also discussing this, that tension between agency, human agency, and predestination. And even you see in the Quranic discourse itself that some of the pagan Arab community in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, from the Quraysh, would be saying things along the lines of that had Allah willed, we wouldn't have had to feed them; they would have been rich themselves. Allah mentions this in Surah Yasin, for example. He says that should we then give in charity and feed those whom had God willed, He could have fed them Himself? So there's this sort of nonchalant approach, dismissive of the ordainments of God, using the justification that God Himself could have made us good people, He could have made us worshippers, He could have made us philanthropists, He could make us people who cared for human beings, but we don't need to because He Himself didn't do so. So this sort of argument and justification was used. However, if you think about it just logically and rationally, it's amply clear that none of us would use that same rationale or line of thinking for our own interactions in the world. In fact, society would become completely, turn on its head, so to speak, because if we apply that line of thinking, we wouldn't have any sort of criminal justice system. Every thief and robber and criminal has only done it out of either out of divine ordainment, and because it's predestined, and therefore, if someone, God forbid, were to slap a person, then you know what, it was destined, so don't get angry with them. So in reality, there's always a sense of justice, and God is the most just, and things are ordained in the sense that they're happening with His knowledge, and ultimately, but in that sense, destination. However, people are also to be held to account accordingly in this world and also in the hereafter, and that's also part of God's destination, the destiny that He has decreed. I don't know if that's answered your question in reality.
Jazakallah khairan. Hope that is clear, but if you'd like a further clarification, then 0203 515 0757, our studio number. Now let's move on to the next question, and that is, after the Fard Salah, we know we have to do dhikr and adhkar. After that, we perform sunnah and all the other nawafil if there is any. And then just before leaving the masjid, someone asked why there is no collective dua, because the person already was accustomed to such culture or tradition in their native home country, but they don't see it in most of the masajid here. Of course, some masajids do have those practices. Is this valid, or if it's not valid, why is it not valid?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So in terms of trying to find out what the requirements are, we should remember, and I hope I don't sound like I'm being overly simplistic or dismissive, worse still, in suggesting this. One should remember the basic reality of Islamic ordainments and tenets is that they are natural i.e., they go with the human spirits, the true higher human spirits, and they also are overarchingly simple. Simple in the sense that there are a certain number of things that are required. There are 5, fard prayers in a day and a night. There is zakat, and that's the only mandatory charity in principle. There's the fasting once in a year, which is in the month of Ramadan, for those who are physically fit, well able, resident, etc. And mature, physically mature, etc. So the actual teachings are overarchingly simple and accessible. Accordingly, many of the things which we do around them, some of them are specifically mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, and we do them still, but they are additional to that. So, for example, and this is not to discourage anyone, dissuade anyone from doing so, the adhkar are not adhkar which have to be done. They are great to be done. This is the prophetic example. This is the way of the salihun, the righteous, those who are Gnostics and God conscious. However, it's not mandatory to do so. Similarly with the rawatib, the salawat the Prophet prayed on either end, one ought to do so. And abandoning it, according to some scholars, is an issue. However, it's not something which is mandatory to do. And similarly, the dua on either end is something which one can do, and some scholars even said can be done in unison, especially for those who don't know how to make the dua or certain duas. It could be done, but one would not be associated, one would not be suggesting that's what the Prophet's example was, or is indeed the best example for one to do, but maybe as a learning mechanism, and it's done, on certain days, etc. So it's something which some of the scholars did say. However, generally speaking, as I mentioned, what would appear to be the normative practice is that one makes dua individually, in one's heart or out, through using one's hands, and that's something which can be done. But the reason why people who do not do so don't do so is because they say there's no specific report of the Prophet making a dua in unison, raising his hands, others raising their hands on a routine basis after every single prayer. And Allah knows best.
And this is in particular to just before leaving the masjid, after fard salah, sunnah, witr, for example, for Isha, and then the person is talking about making a dua in unison. So you're talking about, okay, khalas. Jazakallahu khairan for that. Hope that is clear. Now let's move on swiftly to our next question. Is there any Quran recitation that should be recited or listened to, or dua that should be read before or during when a mother is giving birth in the hospital?
So there are certain things that the scholars mention that people have suggested be recited, and they suggested this on the basis of tajriba, or kind of, for want of a better word, trial and error. Not so much error, but so and so had recited the ayat from Surah Maryam or Surah Al Imran of Maryam alayhi salam going through labor, and it gave a lot of solace and comfort and peace to so and so's neighbor, who, when the mother was going through childbirth, she experienced a great degree of comfort thereby, etc. Similarly, there's a suggestion people narrate about reciting Surah Zalzala on water and kind of applying it, distilled, water which is kind of free from any sterile water, and then applying it over the one's, over the room or over the bump, so to speak. These are things which some scholars, even well-known, prestigious scholars from different parts of the world, in Azhar, in the Gulf itself, have mentioned, and even historically. However, there's no Quranic ayah or hadith on the issue. If one wishes to do these sorts of things and see if it gives them tranquility, fine. One wouldn't ascribe it to the Prophet ﷺ or even to any of the Sahaba. And at any rate, one should always be taking advice and consultation with healthcare professionals as well, to help see if there are any other things, like pain relief, etc., which need being considered in the given person's case, and Allah knows best.
Thank you very much. 1.5 minutes, if we can cover this. A female sister is asking a question. Is prayer valid of a woman who moved a lot when standing in the salah, maybe multiple times, because she thought her dress has creased up below her feet, so she tried to unfold it after she realized that it was probably standing on the end of the prayer mat and not her dress? Is prayer valid?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
So basically, moving around too much, excessive movement in the salah, will that be a valid salah, or the person has to repeat their salah?
Try and keep your duty to Allah to the best of your ability. فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. Don't get overly bogged down in the number of movements, etc., but also try and keep the movements, limited. And perhaps one of the things that helps one do that is kind of bring one's mind to a place of solemnity ahead of time.
Okay. Jazakallahu khairan for that. Hope that is clear. For a specific question that you may have, then please get in touch again. And inshallah, we are more than happy to clarify it because we have limited time and it's sometimes difficult. However, please feel free. We still have one more segment to call us in the next segment, or drop us question via WhatsApp or any other social platforms. You're watching Ask Eman live on Eman Channel on Sky 757. We're also live on Facebook page, YouTube channel, and via our website emanchannel.tv. We'll be right back in a few moments. Do stay tuned with us. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the last segment of Ask Eman live on Eman Channel Sky 757 with Sheikh Abid Khan. 0203 515 0757, our studio number 07916841483, our WhatsApp number. Now let's move on to our next question. If I can summarize it, Sheikh, a potential bride and groom will be meeting up. What kind of questions should they be asking each other, or what is it, the first meeting? What kind of things can they each find out before they make a decision? And is there any specific Salatul Istikhara? Over to you, Sheikh.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So these are, questions which require a bit more of a prolonged answer, because ultimately the whole courses I understand. I haven't actually attended any of such thing or seen it directly myself. The whole course in questions to ask, and you get lists online as well that you can kind of go through and ask friends as well who've been there, done that, and successfully, they say tied the knot, but successfully got married, alhamdulillah, and happy. But in reality, marriage itself is something which has, certain risks attached to it. You can never fully know the person. So obviously ask questions pertaining to their deen, and their friendship circles, their habits and hobbies, perhaps even whether, their thoughts on social media and whether they align with yours and yours with theirs, attitudes to family life, etc. And the role of religion and, activities such as that, attending gatherings of learning and the like, education, Islamically speaking, what their vision is for that, whether it aligns with yours. All of these things should help, inshallah. And some of them will open up questions which will, which you yourself will have a sense of, okay, you know what, they've said that, but let me follow that with another question, for example. So I think those sorts of things will be helpful. And just to try and observe their mannerisms, their methods of dealing with things, their methods of dealing with disputes and disagreements, etc., whether they have the attributes of being able to easily forgive and forget and move on, whether they kind of, are looking for what sort of lifestyle they're looking for. These sorts of things, help give you a real sense of that, of what sort of lifestyle you'd be leading. And of course, when I talk about religiosity, assuming that if the person, they themselves, the questioner, is regular with prayers, their 5 daily prayers, is this something which the suitor also is regular with? How they feel about, you wearing hijab or not wearing hijab, for example, or her wearing hijab or not wearing, etc. How family gatherings are. These sorts of things help. And of course, meeting the family itself, and speaking to any people who, can be referees, so to speak, for them. These sorts of things do help. But I have noticed that there's a whole spectrum of practices and habits when it comes to looking to get married. Some would consider this very almost interview-like, whereas others would say yes, absolutely, and there should be another 25 questions on top of that. So try and make dua, try and ask questions. Don't do an overkill in terms of being in a state of anxiousness, if you can avoid it, inshallah. But try and do your due diligence at the same point. And you can make istikhara as well, inshallah. The dua is the hadith of Jabir in Sahih Bukhari. You can make that dua. And just generally dua for a righteous, pious, compatible spouse, inshallah, who has good character and will bring peace and tranquility in your life. And Allah knows best.
May Allah make it easy. And the dua that Sheikh has mentioned, you can find it in Hisnul Muslim, Salatul Istikhara dua. Sheikh, let's move on to our next question. If we have missed any salah in the past or in our youth, how best to go about making up for them, and what is the expiation for this, if any, Sheikh?
So it's a really important question. Obviously start by making tawbah and istikhara, which inshallah I'm sure you'll have done so already anyway, but that needs to be said all the same by myself. Secondly, according to the majority of scholars, that's from the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi and Hanbali schools of thought, you are to try and make up those prayers as well. If you know the exact number, you make those up. If you don't know the number, then you, with your best estimate, you try and make those salawats up. There is, however, another position which is outside the mainstay positions of the four schools of thought, and that's held by the Hanbali jurist Ibn Taymiyyah and also Ibn Hazm al-Zahiri from the Zahiri school of thought, which is not one of the four schools, canonical schools of thought, but it is a position which one will hear quite frequently as well, which said in this issue. And that is to say that once you've missed a prayer on purpose, I don't mean you stepped through a prayer accidentally or you forgot about a prayer accidentally, etc., but you purposely had missed it in years gone by, then you cannot make that prayer up, but rather you just make lots of extra nawafil and that means supererogatory prayers and sunnah prayers, etc. So there are those two positions. The majority position is that you are to make it up, inshallah ta'ala, and Allah knows best.
Thank you very much for that. Now, let's move on to our next question. And that is, someone has been to perform Umrah and is asking, is Medina and Masjid al-Nawawi haram to non-believers? I understand this question has been asked in reference to certain videos that has been circulating either recently or in the past, whether it be TikTok or Instagram. Sheikh, your thoughts?
So I have a newly adopted policy, I have to state, which is not incredibly helpful, I'm sure, neither for yourselves as viewers, but also not for our presenter over here. But when I feel something's referencing or born out of something that's gone viral or semi-viral, I tend to avoid answering it unless I myself have been privy to those series of videos, etc. So I will politely decline from answering this question, if that's okay. Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khairan. Of course that is, and that's how it should be. And this is one thing we learn, and this should apply to all of us, especially where we are currently witnessing a lot of hate crimes are happening in whichever situation we're talking about. And one of the best ways to avoid getting into unnecessary discussions or arguments is to abstain from those conversation or discussion or anything that can be challenging or unnecessary or get into misunderstanding or getting the situation worse. Then it's best that we leave it for the expert or other people to deal with it. And we should not engage in any conversation that can only create the worst rather than creating something good. And we learn from our shuyukh that if we don't want to talk, or it's better for us to refrain from certain subjects or conversations or making comments, we should all abstain from such a situation, inshallah. Hope that is clear. Next question, Sheikh, if someone prayed their fard on their own and then shortly after they finished, a jama'ah took place, is it permissible for him to pray his fard again with the jama'ah in the masjid?
So just to be clear, we're talking about someone who's prayed their prayer, let's say Dhuhr prayer.
Okay, so what did it say? Let's an example of Dhuhr, Asr, any salah, the actual fard salah in the masjid is completed. So perhaps the person have joined late, so they prayed independently. However, we do notice later on, a couple of other brothers do come in and they have another jama'ah somewhere in the side of the foyer. Now, the person has already prayed, but then realized after he's completed his own individual fard salah, let's say Dhuhr, and then realized there's a jama'ah happening. So obviously we understand the reward of praying in jama'ah. Can this person join to pray the same fard again in jama'ah?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu wa barak Rasul al-Kareem. Now, this issue is something which is differed upon. The issue of repetition of jama'at themselves is something which is discussed within the madahib. But then, secondly, here specifically, the issue is that the gentleman or the questioner has offered the fard prayer, and so they have thereby discharged their duty of that prayer itself. It's been completed, and they did it with the intention of it being fard. So, in essence, if they now pray with the second congregation, they only have one of two options. One is to join them with the intention of it being a nafil prayer, which would be allowed for, let's say if it was the Dhuhr prayer or if it was the Isha prayer, etc. A prayer which can be repeated. So you wouldn't make nafil just for the sake of nafil, supererogatory prayers after Asr. You've prayed your Asr prayer. You wouldn't do that as a supererogatory prayer according to any of the school of thoughts. But for Dhuhr, for Isha, it would be doable if you're doing a supererogatory prayer. However, if it was the intention of being fard, then the question is, how can you possibly do 2 fard prayers? The vast majority of scholars say it's impossible for you to do fard twice. So do you then change your intention of a prayer you've already performed? So you've prayed Dhuhr and say, you know what, I know I prayed that with the intention of it being fard, but now I'm counting that as nafil, and this will be fard. It's the approach of some scholars. Alternatively, you say that was fard and this is now nafil, which then you get some jama'ah reward, but even this, according to some scholars, would not, in fact, the majority would be, it's not permissible because you're meant to have an alignment between a fard fard intentioned imam with a fard intentioned follower, and not fard followed by a nafil prayer or vice versa. So it's something which is kind of replete with lots of nuances, and accordingly, it's probably better avoided. Allah knows best.
That's it. Jazakallahu khairan. So we'll take that advice, best to avoid. And it's an important question. So we thank you for asking an important question. And in fact, all the viewers that have asked us question, including our callers. And of course, thank you very much, Sheikh, for your valuable time, and looking forward to seeing you again in our future episodes. And unfortunately, we've missed, we couldn't take all the phone calls or all the questions. Inshallah, we'll keep it for next time. And until next time, سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.